Welcome to the deep dive. Tonight, we're going deep, really deep, into a single moment, just hours really, where technology failed, politics kicked in hard, and, well, the result was a lie that became the legal foundation for a decade of war.
Yeah, we're talking about the Gulf of Tonkin incident, August 1964. It's this incredible case study, isn't it? How confusion on the ground or, at sea can get translated into absolute certainty at the highest levels of government.
It really is. And it's not just about the ships or the battle reports. It's about how fast official Washington, the White House, the intel folks, Congress, turned something incredibly murky into a clear-cut reason to act. For political reasons, mostly.
Exactly. And it hinges on this 30-minute window, almost literally.
That broadcast, right. Picture it. Late night, August 4th, 1964, people are watching TV, maybe getting ready for bed, and President Lyndon B. Johnson comes on, very serious, talking about open aggression on the high seas, unprovoked attacks.
Plural, attacks. That was key.
Right, and in that, half-hour speech, he announces retaliatory airstrikes are already underway. Operation Pierce Arrow, boom, escalation.
And the speed is just staggering when you look back. The decision to jump from this sort of simmering conflict into what became a full-scale war, it was basically made and announced based on something that, well, the evidence we have now is overwhelming.
It just didn't happen.
It didn't happen. A catastrophic mistake, you could say. But then deliberately amplified, maybe even weaponized for political gain back home.
And that's what we want to unpack today. How did that happen? How does an error become policy, become war? We need to look beyond just the timeline and focus on the people involved, their choices, or maybe their silence.
Yeah, we're sort of focusing on three key groups or pillars, if you like. Their actions really drove this whole thing.
Okay, so first,
you've got the guy on the scene, Captain John J. Herrick. He's the commander out there at the USS Maddox. He's wrestling with these terrifying reports coming from his own equipment, sonar pings, radar blips, versus what he can actually see, which is nothing.
Right. No visual confirmation.
None. So his doubt, his professional, careful doubt, becomes this really inconvenient truth for Washington.
Okay, pillar two.
That's President Johnson, LBJ, in the Oval Office. You have to remember the context. 1964 is an election year. He's facing Barry Goldwater, who's hitting him hard on being soft on communism.
So strength was paramount.
Absolutely. For LBJ, this reported second attack wasn't necessarily a crisis to be carefully investigated first. The sources suggest he saw it more as, well, an opportunity. A chance to look decisive, strong, and get a mandate.
An opportunity to be seized, as some sources put it?
Exactly.
And the third pillar.
These are the people often invisible in these stories. The intelligence analysts, particularly at the NSA, the National Security Agency. They have the raw data, the signals intelligence, SIGINT.
The intercepts.
The ground truth, supposedly.
Supposedly. But what later analysis showed, quite devastatingly, is that their doubts, their technical cautions about the data being ambiguous or contradictory, they were systematically pushed aside, ignored, or maybe even deliberately altered further up the chain.
Okay, so that's our mission for this deep dive, using the sources to see how that messy, inconvenient reality got smoothed over, ignored, maybe twisted into this clean, politically useful lie. But first, we absolutely have to set the stage. The whole idea of unprovoked aggression, that narrative just falls apart when you see what the U.S. ships were actually doing there.
Right. You have to understand the setup. Okay, so first things first. These destroyers, the USS Maddox and then later the USS C. Turner Joy, they weren't just, sailing through international waters on holiday cruise. Not even close.
No, they were on very specific, very classified missions. DeSoto Patrol.
Exactly. DeSoto patrols. What does that mean? Well, it means they're intelligence-gathering ships. They'd sail right up along hostile coastlines, in this case, North Vietnam.
But staying just outside the legal limit? Technically, yes. Staying outside the 12-mile territorial limit that most nations recognized. But the Maddox, specifically, was packed with electronic gear. Its job was basically to tickle North Vietnamese defenses.
Tickle them? How?
By sailing close, you force them to turn on their coastal radar, their communication systems. And when they do, bingo. The Maddox scoops up all that electronic data. SIGINT.
Mapping out their defenses, frequencies, capability.
Precisely. It's high-stakes electronic spying, really. Dressed up as just, being in the area.
But that wasn't the only thing going on, right? That's just part of the picture. There was something much more aggressive happening at the same time.
Yes, and this is crucial. O-Plan 34A. This is the part that often gets left out of the simpler versions of the story.
Okay, what was O-Plan 34A?
Top secret program. Covert operations, basically sabotage and raids against North Vietnam carried out by South Vietnamese commandos. And this is key, trained, equipped, and directed by the U.S., by American officials. These were acts of war.
So you've got the spy ships offshore, and then you've got these commando raids hitting the coast.
Happening concurrently.
Yeah.
They're very close together. And that brings us to the timing, which is everything here. Why did North Vietnam react so strongly?
Because the Maddox showed up right after.
Right after a major O-Plan 34A raid. On the night of July 30th, 31st, just before the Maddox really got into position, South Vietnamese PT boats, under this U.S.-directed plan, had shelled North Vietnamese targets on Han Mi Island and other coastal radar sites.
Okay, so put yourself in Hanoi's shoes for a second.
Exactly. Your coast just got hit by commandos and speedboats. And boom, the very next day, this American warship, bristling with antennas, shows up right offshore, hovering, listening.
You're not going to see that as a coincidence.
No way. You're going to see that destroyer as part of the attack, maybe spotting targets, maybe assessing damage, definitely gathering intelligence to help the next attack.
They saw the Maddox as a legitimate military target, a direct part of the aggression against them.
Which totally contradicts the innocent victim narrative that was sold back home. Completely. So when the first incident happened, the one that was real, on August 2nd, North Vietnam didn't see it as them starting something out of the blue. They saw it as hitting back.
Okay, let's talk about August 2nd, because that one definitely happened.
Oh, yeah, no question. August 2nd, 1964. 3 North Vietnamese torpedo boats. Their 135th Torpedo Squadron, they came out and attacked the USS Maddox. This was real combat. Guns firing, torpedoes in the water, though none hit the Maddox.
And what was the outcome of that fight?
It was intense. The Maddox fired back. Planes from a nearby U.S. carrier got involved. In the end, the Maddox took very minor damage, one single bullet hole, basically, a 14.5 millimeter round. One U.S. aircraft got slightly damaged, too.
And the North Vietnamese boats?
Yeah, they got the worst of it. All 3 boats were damaged. And crucially, they lost sailors. 4 killed, 6 wounded. It was a real deadly encounter.
So August 2nd establishes something critical.
Absolutely. It sets this psychological baseline. For the U.S. sailors, it confirms the danger is real. They have been attacked. For Washington, it confirms North Vietnam is willing to engage U.S. Navy ships directly.
Which, ironically, probably made everyone more likely to believe another attack was happening just 2 nights later.
Exactly. It created this high-alert, hair-trigger environment. The confirmation bias was already setting in. They'd seen the enemy once. They were expecting to see him again.
But despite that obvious danger demonstrated on August 2nd, Washington didn't say, okay, let's pull back, maybe cool things down.
No, the opposite. They doubled down. Politically, pulling back would have looked weak, especially with Goldwater snapping at LBJ's heels. So the order came. Continue the mission.
And they added another ship.
Yep. The USSC Turner Joy was sent to join the Maddox, and they were ordered back into the same contested waters, armed with intelligence we now know was deeply flawed, suggesting Hanoi was gearing up for round 2.
So the ships are back out there, crews are tense, primed for a fight.
They're expecting trouble. Which brings us to the night of August 4th, the Phantom Battle, where everything just goes completely off the rails.
Okay, so August 4th. The conditions out there sound like something out of a movie, just perfectly designed for confusion.
Oh, absolutely. The sources call it a perfect storm for misinterpretation. First off, the weather. It's an overcast night. Pitch black. No moon at all.
So visibility.
Practically zero. They said to be 300 yards. Barely the length of the ship itself. You couldn't see anything out there visually. Nothing.
Which means you're totally dependent on your instruments.
100%.
Right.
Radar for surface contacts, sonar for anything underwater. And the guys operating this equipment, they're young, they're stressed. They just went through that real firefight 2 days ago. The pressure on them is immense.
Every blip, every noise must have sounded like doom.
You got it. And this is where the technology itself starts to betray them. Let's break down the specific malfunctions, because it's fascinating technically.
Okay, radar first. What went wrong there?
Well, radar isn't magic, especially in weird weather. The atmospheric conditions that night, temperature, humidity, caused what analysts later called freak weather effects. Basically, the radar signals were bending and bouncing off waves, maybe even storm clouds, in unpredictable ways.
Creating false echoes.
Exactly. Ghost images. Things that look like small, fast-moving boats on the screen, but they aren't really there. An operator under pressure sees that. They're shouting, "Contact."
Okay, so radar's unreliable. What about sonar, listening underwater?
That was even worse, possibly, because the ships themselves were making noise. Remember, they think they're under attack, so they're maneuvering violently. high-speed turns, zigzagging to dodge torpedoes that aren't there.
And doing that creates
Chaos underwater, specifically something called propeller cavitation. When the ship's propellers are thrashing around at high speed, they create bubbles and voids in the water. That process makes a lot of noise.
noise, that sounds like.
To a sonar operator, especially one who's already jumpy, listening intently in the dark, it sounds terrifyingly like the signature sounds of incoming torpedoes, or maybe even the engines of small enemy boats underwater.
So they're literally hearing their own ship's movements and thinking it's the enemy.
They're chasing their own tail, acoustically speaking.
Yeah.
They were fighting ghosts, generated by their own equipment and their own evasive actions.
There's that great analogy in the sources.
Yeah, it's like standing in a dark, stormy room, only hearing the sounds of your own heart pounding and the wind rattling the glass, yet concluding the sound must be the enemy breaking down the door. It perfectly captures that closed loop of fear and technology failure.
So when did the actual battle start that night?
Around 9:34 p.m. local time, Herrick's radar starts lighting up with these contacts, skunks they called them. Unidentified bogies, moving fast.
Listen to Herrick's reaction.
Initially, he was cautious. He thought maybe it was a trap. But then the reports just kept coming, more contacts. Sonar starts reporting torpedoes in the water. The Turner Joy locks onto a radar contact nearby.
And then the shooting starts.
And for about 2 hours, maybe a bit more, from roughly 9:30 to 11:30 p.m., those two destroyers are blazing away into the darkness.
How much ammo did they go through?
The logs are pretty specific. Around 350 shells fired from their main guns at about 18 different fleeting radar contacts that would just pop up and disappear.
And the torpedo reports.
This is wild. Sonar operators reported 22 supposed enemy torpedoes detected in the water. 22. Imagine the panic.
It sounds like utter chaos. They must have thought they were in the fight of their lives.
They absolutely did. The crew genuinely believed they were under heavy, sustained attack and were lucky to survive.
But the reality, the cold, hard facts afterwards.
Completely different. 0 damage to either U.S. ship. Not a scratch from enemy fire. They searched the waters afterwards. No debris, no oil slicks, no wreckage, no sign whatsoever that any North Vietnamese boats were ever hit or sunk.
And the pilots. Weren't planes scrambled?
Yes. Navy pilots were flying overhead during parts of this. They flew low, looking hard. The reports. They couldn't see anything. No enemy boats, no wakes, no gunfire flashes from anywhere but the U.S. ships, nothing on the water.
So the conclusion seems inescapable.
It really is.
Yeah.
August 4th was a phantom battle. Driven by bad weather, faulty gear, and nerves frayed by the real fight 2 days earlier, confirmation bias running wild in the dark.
And while these sailors are fighting echoes in the Tonkin Gulf, back in Washington, the initial frantic reports are landing on desks.
Yeah, the first reports, the ones filled with torpedoes fired under attack, those are making their way up the chain, and the political clock starts ticking, fast.
Okay, so this is where the story takes that critical turn. From chaos at sea to, well, deliberate political action. And the first person to really challenge the narrative was the commander on the scene, wasn't it?
Yes, Captain Herrick. You have to give him immense credit. Once the firing died down, the adrenaline maybe wore off a little, he didn't just accept the chaos. He started asking hard questions.
What did he do?
He ordered an immediate review right there on the ship. Looked at the logs, the radar tapes, the sonar records, talked to his key officers and men. He started piecing together the inconsistencies, the lack of visual sightings, the weird equipment behavior, the sheer number of torpedoes reported versus, 0 hits.
And he realized they might have made a terrible mistake.
He realized the initial reports, sent in the heat of the moment, were very likely wrong. That they might have been shooting at ghosts, essentially. Freak weather, overeager sonar guys.
So he tries to correct the record.
Urgently. He sends off a message using the highest possible priority designation, a flash cable. This means, stop everything, read this now. It goes to his superiors in Honolulu, and crucially, it gets relayed to Washington.
And the timing of this message is critical, right?
Right.
When did it arrive in D.C.?
It hit Washington at 1:27 p.m. Eastern Time on August 4th, right in the middle of the afternoon, while the COP brass were actively meeting and deciding on the response.
So it wasn't too late in theory. What did Herrick's message actually say?
It was pretty direct, urging extreme caution, something like, Review of action makes many reported contacts and torpedoes fired appear doubtful. Freak weather effects on radar and overeager Sonarmen may have accounted for many reports. No actual visual sightings by Mad Docs suggest complete evaluation before any further action taken.
Wow, that's the commander on the spot saying, whoa, hold on, let's double check this before we do anything drastic.
Exactly. It's professional skepticism at its best, under immense pressure. He's basically waving a huge red flag.
So Washington gets this message at 1:27 p.m. What's happening in the White House around that time?
Well, the wheels were already spinning way too fast. The initial panicked reports of a second attack had reached LBJ earlier that morning. By 9:12 a.m., he was being told, yeah, it's confirmed, a second attack happened.
Based on those flawed first reports.
Right. And by 1 p.m., just before Herrick's caution cable arrives, LBJ is already meeting with his top advisors, Secretary of Defense McNamara, Secretary of State Rusk. They're planning the retaliatory airstrikes.
So Herrick's message lands right in the middle of them making the decision to bomb North Vietnam.
Precisely. And they're faced with this stark choice. Listen to the commander on the scene who's now expressing serious doubts, or stick with the initial story that gives them the justification they politically need.
The story that lets LBJ look strong, decisive, especially in an election year.
That's the calculation. The political momentum, the need to act fast and look tough, just completely overrode Herrick's plea for caution. The need for a simple narrative beat the complex, messy truth.
Did they just ignore Herrick's message?
Not entirely. They actually cabled him back, asking for clarification, essentially pressuring him to reconfirm the attack despite his doubts. They needed him to stick to the original story. While Herrick still expressed reservations in his replies, Washington chose to run with the earlier, more convenient reports. The decision was made. Retaliation first, verification later, or never.
But just dismissing the commander wasn't enough, was it? To sell this to Congress and the public, they needed proof. They needed intelligence backing.
Exactly. And this leads us to probably the most disturbing part. The way intelligence, specifically signals intelligence from the NSA, was handled, or mishandled, or worse.
This is where the work of NSA historian Robert Ħanyak comes in.
Yes, years later, in 2005, I believe, his internal NSA history was declassified. It's devastating. Ħanyak went back through all the raw SIGINT intercepts from those days in August '64.
And what did he find?
Two main things. First, he confirmed definitively. The August 4th attack never happened. The SIGINT contained no proof of it. But second, and much more damning, he found evidence that NSA reporting up the chain to policymakers had been, in his words, deliberately skewed.
Skewed how? They couldn't just make up intercepts.
No, but they could twist what they had. Ħanyak found they basically engaged in cherry-picking and misinterpretation. They took signals intelligence related to the real fight on August 2nd, maybe North Vietnamese communications about damage assessment or future readiness after that fight.
And presented it as evidence related to August 4th.
Exactly. They might have misdated intercepts or misinterpreted ambiguous language to make it sound like the North Vietnamese were preparing for, or maybe even boasting about, a second attack on the 4th. They essentially took the evidence from the real event and used it to prop up the phantom one.
That's deliberate manipulation.
It appears that way. Ħanyak also found that intercepts which contradicted the attack narrative or pointed out analytic errors and confusion within the intelligence community itself were systematically withheld. They weren't included in the summaries going to the White House or the Pentagon.
So they filtered the intelligence to fit the preordained conclusion.
It seems clear that the administration needed a narrative of repeated, unprovoked aggression to get the kind of broad war powers they wanted from Congress. And the intelligence reporting was tailored, consciously or perhaps due to institutional pressure, to provide exactly that narrative.
The messy truth from Captain Herrick, bad weather, jumpy sailors, equipment failure that was useless politically.
Utterly useless. They needed a clean story of enemy action. And it seems they bent the intelligence to fit that story.
So Washington had its story, however flawed. And the political result was swift and overwhelming.
Unbelievably swift. Just 3 days after that phantom attack on August 4th, on August 7th, 1964, Congress delivered exactly what LBJ wanted. They passed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, officially the Southeast Asia Resolution.
And this wasn't just some minor policy adjustment. This was huge.
Oh, it was monumental. It fundamentally shifted the balance of power. The resolution gave the president the authority to, quote, take all necessary measures to repel any armed attack against the forces of the United States and to prevent further aggression.
All necessary measures. That sounds broad.
It was incredibly broad. Essentially, it gave LBJ and future presidents the power to wage conventional war in Southeast Asia without needing Congress to formally declare war, as the Constitution normally requires. It was carte blanche, a blank check.
And Congress just handed it over. What was the vote?
Astonishingly one-sided. It sailed through the House of Representatives 416-0, unanimous.
Wow. And the Senate?
Almost unanimous. The vote was 88-2. Only 2 senators voted against it.
Just 2. Who were they? They must have known they were swimming against a massive tide.
They absolutely were. Senator Wayne Morse, a Democrat from Oregon, and Senator Ernest Gruening, a Democrat from Alaska.
And what was their reasoning? Why did they object?
Morse, in particular, made a powerful constitutional argument. He wasn't necessarily saying don't act, but he was saying if you're going to war, do it properly. Follow the Constitution. Declare war. Don't hand over that power based on a rushed judgment about a confusing incident. He famously warned his colleagues they were making a huge mistake, subverting and circumventing the Constitution.
Prophetic words.
Deeply prophetic. But they were drowned out by the patriotic fervor and the desire to support the president in a time of perceived crisis.
Meanwhile, LBJ got his resolution, and he knew exactly how powerful it was.
Oh, yeah. Privately, he had that very folksy but chilling way of putting it. He called the resolution like grandma's nightshirt. It covers everything. He knew he now had the authority to do almost anything he wanted militarily in Vietnam.
And he started using that authority almost immediately.
He did. The retaliatory Operation Pierce Arrow Strikes happened right away. But the resolution became the legal justification for everything that followed.
Like Operation Rolling Thunder.
Exactly. That started in February 1965. A massive, sustained bombing campaign against North Vietnam that went on for 3 years. Punishing, devastating, authorized by the Tonkin Gulf Resolution.
And ground troops. Because that was the big shift, wasn't it?
That was the Rubicon. The resolution provided the legal cover for the first large-scale deployments of regular U.S. ground combat units to South Vietnam starting 1965. Marines landed at Da Nang. The mission changed from advising to fighting. The war escalated dramatically, and the cost just started mounting, financially first.
Astronomically. The sources put the direct cost of the war just between 1965 and 1975 at over $138.9 billion. That's in dollars at the time. Today, it would be vastly more, and that doesn't even touch the long-term costs, like veterans' health care.
But the financial cost, as huge as it was, is dwarfed by the human cost.
Tragically, yes. The ultimate price of that August 4th decision and the resolution that followed is measured in lives. Over 58,220 American service members killed or listed as missing in action during the Vietnam War.
A staggering loss for the U.S., but for the Vietnamese people. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Estimates vary widely because it's so hard to count, but they range from maybe 970,000 up to 3 million Vietnamese people, soldiers and civilians, north and south, killed during the conflict spawned by that escalation.
3 million.
It's devastating, and that doesn't even count the casualties in neighboring countries. The war spilled over. Tens of thousands more killed in Cambodia and Laos as part of the wider conflict that the Tonkin Gulf Resolution enabled.
So the blank check written in August 64 was cashed in blood across Southeast Asia for a decade.
That's the grim reality. A decision based on phantom torpedoes and political expediency led to one of the deadliest conflicts of the 20th century.
But the truth, eventually, it started to seep out, didn't it? The official story couldn't hold forever.
No. Cracks started appearing fairly early on, relatively speaking. By 1968, there was enough skepticism, partly fueled by journalists and those dissenting senators, that the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, under Senator Fulbright, held hearings.
And that's when
Robert McNamara, who had been Secretary of Defense back in '64, finally admitted under questioning that yes, the Maddox was involved in activities related to those covert O-Plan 34A raids. That contradicted years of official statements saying the destroyers were just on routine patrol in international waters.
A major crack in the official narrative.
A huge one. But the full picture, the confirmation that the August 4th attack itself was fiction and that the intelligence had been deliberately skewed, that took much, much longer.
When did that finally become clear?
Not really, until the declassification of those internal NSA histories, like Robert Hanyok's study, which became public around 2005. That's when the smoking gun evidence really came out, confirming the non-event and the manipulation, decades after the fact.
And the resolution itself, was it ever revoked?
Yes. Congress finally repealed the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution in January 1971, but by then the U.S. was deeply, tragically mired in the war. Repealing it didn't stop the fighting immediately. The commitment was already locked in.
So it's just this incredibly stark example how pressure, politics, and maybe bad faith can take a moment of confusion and turn it into a pretext for war.
A dark template, really, for how easily reality can be bent to fit a desired political outcome with catastrophic consequences. #𝐃𝐄𝐄𝐏.
So when you boil it all down, this whole Gulf of Tonkin incident, it's just wrapped in this deep, disturbing paradox, isn't it?
It really is. You have this moment of utter chaos at sea. Bad weather, glitchy equipment, terrified sailors shooting at shadows, pure confusion.
And back in Washington, they take that chaos and transform it almost instantly into something clean, simple, and decisive. An unprovoked enemy attack.
Yeah, they demanded certainty when none existed. And they chose the narrative that served their political purpose, the lie, effectively over the messy, complicated, ambiguous truth that their own commander, Captain Herrick, was trying to tell them.
Because the truth would have slowed things down. It would have required caution, investigation. It wouldn't have given LBJ the immediate justification he felt he needed.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that intentional distortion, built on that shaky foundation, provided the legal cover, that grandma's nightshirt, for a war that lasted a decade and cost millions of lives. It reshaped America, reshaped Southeast Asia.
So for you listening, the big takeaway here, the thing to really grapple with from this deep dive is how fragile that line can be. The line between what's actually happening on the ground or at sea, how that gets reported, how intelligence gets synthesized, and then how political leaders ultimately make decisions.
Yeah, this history really underscores how institutional pressures, political ambition, that desire for a simple story in a complex world can lead policymakers to grab onto expedient narratives, even when inconvenient facts are staring them in the face.
Which brings us to the final thought we want to leave you with, something to mull over, maybe apply to today.
Think about it. What crises or complex situations today seem to demand immediate black and white answers?
Yeah.
Where is the pressure intense to reject ambiguity, to ignore complexity, and just embrace a simple, decisive narrative?
And maybe more importantly, what price might we be paying or be willing to pay if that simple narrative turns out to be wrong? Or, like in Tonkin, deliberately constructed?
It's a question worth asking given the lessons of August 1964.
That's our deep dive into the 30-minute lie that launched the Vietnam War. Thanks for joining us.